So we've spoken today we've heard a lot about interoperability and the importance of standards, and this is certainly a recurring theme, one that has come up not only earlier in the discussions around primary markets, the issuance of digital securities or DLT-based securities, but also more broadly when it comes to electronification, and also as we heard earlier just now in the vendor sessions. It is something that is of importance, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Rowan Varrall from the Digital Token Identifier Foundation and by Stephan Dreyer from ANA to speak specifically about the digital assets ecosystem and the challenges and potential solutions here to identify tokens and securities, assets in that space. So perhaps I can ask you first to introduce yourselves and provide us with your angle on this topic.
Thanks, Gabriel. I'm Rowan Varrall from the DTI Foundation, which is the registration authority for the relatively new ISO standard for digital token identification. What is a DTI? It's essentially a code which represents a digital token on a distributed ledger. Why is this relevant in this context? We all know ISIN captures information on security information such as a bond's maturity date or coupon rate. What a DTI does is looking at the token implementation itself. So where is the token essentially? What ledger is it on? Does it have a smart contract address? What is the token validation mechanism, for example? As you can imagine from our perspective, having a standardized way of capturing both the security information and the token information is really important for both regulators and also the market in general in understanding how to, as we are still looking at how to best manage all the opportunities and the risks in the digital asset ecosystem.
Stephan.
Hi, good afternoon, pleasure to be here. So many of you may be familiar with ANA, born out of the traditional finance universe where ISIN, as Rowan already referred to, has been the global leading identifier for financial and referential instruments for the last 40 years. And so when I joined ANA at the beginning of 2020, one of the topics that was being looked at was this whole kind of crypto digital assets and what does it mean, what are these things, what is the implication for the ISIN code. So we had a task force that took a deep dive in really trying to understand this and ensuring that ISIN was fit for purpose in a digital world. And the conclusion we came to that a financial instrument, whether it's issued in a traditional form or a DLT implementation, is still that asset. So nothing is fundamentally changing about it, just the way that it comes to being. But what about other things? So there were other things floating around, bitcoins and tethers and stable coins, digital currencies of many types, and we had to understand what the implication there was. And there it was identified that it was conceivable that while those, whether they're securities or not, kind of maybe an open question, particularly from a regulatory perspective, but it was conceivable that those could be used as underlyings or referential instruments for other financial instruments. And on that basis, because when we look at what standards do, in particular a standard like ISIN, to help identify and aggregate risk exposure, compliance, data management. So all those functions were relevant there as well. You wanted to be able to understand, what is my exposure to Bitcoin as an underlying. And so on that basis, we identified that ISIN was indeed relevant for other crypto assets. And so ANA was part of the ISO working group that was part of the development of the digital token identifier. And so in the development of that standard, it was always clear that there was a need for the two standards to work together in a complementary fashion. So that kind of takes us a bit forward to the collaboration between ANA and the DTIF.
You mentioned the ISIN, whether it's when we spoke about, or when we heard about primary markets earlier, about some of the issuances, the DLT-based issuances, but also in secondary markets, all securities will have an ISIN. This is not even questioned. It's a standard feature nowadays. The question is where you have new identifiers, such as the DTI, what are the key benefits, and is there a difference for digital securities that are held by a CSD, for example, or an ICSD, and those that live in a public blockchain?
So I would say there are benefits to everybody in the ecosystem, and a very short answer is it doesn't matter whether it's on public or private blockchain. Digging a little bit deeper into this, the context, the reason why this new ISO standard was developed by industry stakeholders was to address the challenges still remaining in the further adoption of tokenization and just the digital asset ecosystem as a whole, such as the unknown or potential link between any underlying assets, the uncertainty around governance models, such as whether it's public or private, and any operational risks involved with that, and also just being on the same page about speaking about the same ledger in the same manner and the same token, so identification of those components. And what the DTI does is create that unambiguous link between the token and the asset and the ledger and all that additional technical information on the DTI. As you can imagine, standardization is very beneficial for everybody in the market, such as looking at interoperability and scalability. And what regulators particularly have been interested in with the DTI is looking at that clear link between the security and where the token actually is. For that reason, they're able to better understand all the monitoring of the DLT activities and also understand that governance model as well. Also, just skipping over, the DTI isn't just relevant for security tokens, because it is looking at every single functionally fungible, it's looking at every single token implementation. This also captures things like stablecoins, asset reference tokens, e-money tokens, however you want to call it, plus cryptocurrencies as well. Not just for the identification, but also providing that new unit of price and quantity when looking at exchanging crypto assets as well. And that's one of the main reasons as well why it was picked up as the crypto asset identifier under MiCA, for example. But coming back to financial markets, obviously a lot of us in the room, our organizations are really keen in making sure that we're all aligned with industry standards and best practices. And that's where we've seen a lot of banks' interest and financial market infrastructures, such as digital exchanges coming and picking up the DTI standard and using this as their format of understanding and identifying the crypto asset ecosystems within their own internal systems, as to not reinvent the wheel in their own siloed ways. So this is really all about more effective data management, and because the DTI has that clear link with the ISIN as well in the systems, that's an easy win for the interoperability and connecting and making sure that everybody can actually access this new information that the DTI provides.
Okay, that's very interesting, and kind of goes back to the concept of interoperability on the one hand, but also in light of the collaboration between ANA and DTI Foundation. Stephan, what are perhaps the lessons from your perspective that you can draw from the whole process when ISINs were created and the ISIN allocation to such new identifiers?
Yeah, so when the DTI standard was published, as I said before, it was already clear that there was a need for both standards to be able to work together. And I think it's important to reemphasize that we're talking about identification, unique identification of something, but they are different, very different standards and the reference data associated with them. So when we think about the ISIN, we're looking, and Rowan touched on this briefly, the economic attributes of an asset and that reference data, the coupons, the maturities, the voting rights, those type of things. But also within the ISIN, you have other important standards such as the CFI, which is classification of financial instruments, which is very important for regulatory reporting, particularly in the EU. You have the financial instrument short name, you have the legal entity identifier, and so it was a natural fit to look at if you have a security that's being implemented on a DLT, of introducing the DTI into that. And one of the things that we had to understand was that relationship, right? So what is the relationship between the asset and the implementation or implementations? And so we identified that there was a one-to-many relationship in many cases, and that can continue to evolve if you had forking of tokens, if you had other types of corporate actions, or other implementations of a particular asset on the same chain, on different chains. So we spent a significant amount of time in our joint task force looking at how to really do that implementation. One of the elements that had to be looked at, in particular on the ISIN side, was that gap where we didn't have ISINs for crypto assets, and understanding how to do that. We have, you may be aware, 120 members who are national numbering agencies as registration agents for the ISIN and other standards. And we looked at the crypto assets and realized that a lot of the attributes that were required to identify the responsibility on the National Numbering Agency were not there. So we're looking at now a more centralized type of model. At the end of October, we have now released or issued the first 50 official ISINs for crypto assets. And in addition to that, and they are, by the way, DTI based, so the DTI forms the base number of the ISIN so that you have the interoperability. And then we have the associated DTIs. On the security token side, where the national numbering agencies were already in the process of assigning ISINs for issuances of security tokens, there the task was looking at getting DTIs assigned for them. So making sure that there was a sharing of information between the activities on the ANA side, where the stronghold was on security tokens, and on the DTI Foundation side, where the primary focus up until then had been on cryptocurrencies and stablecoins.
Okay, that's very interesting. So it is something that goes hand in hand, in fact, where you have a crypto asset that may have an ISIN, that might also have a DTI, and as you mentioned, an ISIN that can be based on the DTI for crypto securities. Just looking ahead, Ron, you alluded to MiCA and other regulations coming into place. What are the priorities from your perspective looking ahead?
From our perspective, we're expecting to see a larger uptick in DTI use and allocations over the next 12 to 18 months, especially as the DTI has been recommended against the ISIN within the EU DLT pilot regime. We'll be expecting use once we're seeing approvals and licensing under that regime. We're also expecting to see next half next year, DTI use in crypto asset white papers for stablecoins, specifically asset reference and e-money tokens. And also toward the end of next year, we're expecting the use of DTIs for crypto service providers when they're doing transaction, order record keeping, management, etc. So quite a few things there. What we're doing in that space is making sure that the market is able to connect with us as easy as possible, so looking at expanding the API development, etc., all of that kind of stuff. In terms of just the wider ISO standards, just like any other ISO standard, it goes through iterative processes of development and additions based on what the market needs. And based on that, there are a few things such as making a clearer hierarchy between what a functionally fungible group actually represents, the equivalent type of tokens which are potentially implemented across many different ledgers, but link back to the same underlying asset. So making that clearer in the hierarchy as well and in the registry. Then also looking at a few other things like bringing in issuer and maintainer values, linking more directly with ANA, as well as the inclusion of non-fungible tokens, just expanding the wider universe of DTIs in general. So quite a few things going on.
Indeed, that sounds like a very busy agenda and one where there is opportunity to use and adopt the DTI. Stephan, from your perspective, what are the priorities looking ahead?
Yeah, so I think we will definitely see a continued uptake in the issuance of security tokens. I think this year has been very much about that, and those things kind of moving out of POC concepts and becoming a bit more mainstream. And there the focus is making sure that in addition to the work that we do with ISIN in our task force and our collaboration with DTIF, ensuring that all those security tokens get assigned a digital token identifier, so that there is that additional level of transparency at the DLT level, at the token level. We'll continue to work through the existing universe of DTI identified tokens, so the payment tokens, utility tokens, governance tokens, and work through and start assigning them official ISINs with XT prefixes. And part of the challenge is we want to take a real close look as we move through that universe in the task force and do the relevant research to ensure that they are not financial instruments that would be allocated in ISIN otherwise elsewhere. We will look on the ANA side to formalize a governance framework to be able to designate a numbering agency to do the work of ISIN assignment for the crypto asset side, so not the financial instrument. And taking a look at other aspects. So that's just one part of that broader universe. I think we'll start seeing a look at the other real world assets, non-bankable assets, so the real estate, the NFTs, art, and whatnot.
Okay, that sounds all very exciting. It seems like it is getting more, it's becoming almost more mainstream with the inclusion of, or with the allocation of ISINs to such instruments, also the DTI. So it is something that is, even though we heard earlier, it is still emerging slowly, at least when you look at the fixed income space and digital securities, which we heard might be a bit slow at the beginning, but which is gaining more and more traction. And it's very encouraging to hear about this initiative, the collaboration between DTIF and ANA. And certainly I think there is a lot more to work together on going forward and a lot more to look forward to. So with that, thank you very much.